Hello, everyone. Sterling White here, and today's topic is going to be how to make that shift from single family to multifamily and just actual steps that you can take. All right, let me the audio. Let me know if the audio is still the same. All right, having some complications with the audio right now, so just gonna go ahead and check that. Probably the audio went a little bit. So for those of you who are on Instagram right in front of me, go ahead and comment below on the roll call. Let's go ahead and do that. And Nikki, if you can let me know on the audio side, so we can keep checking that. Okay, I will try to.
Myself. All right, so we're just doing some troubleshooting right now, everyone. Okay. All right, so the mic is golden. All right, so got through the technicalities on things. So yeah, as I mentioned, those of you who are on the Instagram, go ahead and comment below with where you are from. I'm here in Indianapolis, Indiana, and those of you who are on the Facebook as well as the YouTube, comment below. We're going to go ahead and do a roll call. And today's subject matter is on how to make the shift from single family to multifamily, along with some actionable items. So, all right, well, we'll go ahead and jump right into it. And in terms of, yeah, comment below. I'm here in Indianapolis, Indiana, and that is the 317 area code. And hopefully, I trust you and your families are doing well during this current time. Myself here in Indianapolis, Indiana, they are starting to open up certain businesses, not the gyms and all that just yet, but some business outside of just the normal essential, I would say. Such as hair salons is one. There's certain restaurants that they're opening. So going to go ahead and drop right into the content for you all. Born and raised in Indianapolis, just to give you some context on myself. Yes, I am bald. And those of you who are on the Facebook in front of me, it would mean the world for you to like, love, and share this. And the same thing for you who are on Instagram. Just go ahead and tap that heart button as quickly as you can. I've switched up the scenery. Born and raised in Indianapolis, Indiana, not so good parts of the city, fraternal twin brother, single mother, and we grew up in Section 8 housing on government assistance. And at the same time, my mother did the best she could with what she had. And through that, the environment we grew up in was just not the greatest. And I remember one instance, my brother and I were actually sitting down at one of like those multicolor Fisher Price tables. We were about 5 or 6 years old. As soon as we get done eating dinner, a bullet comes right through the back patio where we were actually sitting. So I may not be here, he may not be here. And fast forward, got started in real estate. This was 2009. And at that time, it was very similar times to what we're currently in. So not so good, and fell in love with real estate. And I was on the construction. I was a laborer, and then shifted to the investing in 2013 was when I was able to buy my very first property, 23 years old, no money out of pocket, and then scale portfolio to 150 single families. Yes, 150 of those, and made the complete shift to multifamily in 2017, where got portfolio just under 600, exited out of all the single families, and now portfolio is just under 400 units. With valuation of just under $20 million. So one, I still make mistakes to this day, not perfect by any means. And I share those trials, tribulations, the mistakes, the successes that I've ultimately had to get me to where I am at this day. So go ahead. Those of you who are on here, ask your questions too, because towards the end, we'll be doing some Q&A. Not ball, but doesn't matter, does it? No, it does not. Definitely. The thing with being bald, I would say when you're running, I'm a firm believer that you run faster just because the aerodynamics. So that's just my personal thing. Just kidding on that. So now we're going to drop right into the content, which is some very actionable items on making that transition from single family to multifamily. Give me a quick second, everyone. All right, had to turn that off in the background. And just firstly, starting off having a specific deadline. Because the thing is, when you're making the transition from single family to multifamily, there's so many things that you can learn from an education standpoint. and that you can run into analysis paralysis. Because at the same time, there's so many different models. There's buy and hold when it comes to multifamily. There's also fix and flip. When it comes to multifamily, there is whether you want to do it on a 3-year horizon in terms of exiting, whether you want to do it for the long term until you're able to essentially pass it on to your relatives. So through that is the approach I have always personally taken is just setting a deadline of a month and a half. So meaning I will do all the necessary education on the multifamily side, because I would say single family and multifamily are completely separate animals, and I'll get into the reasons why they're different. So just setting that deadline and say, I'm going to take a month and a half to do all the necessary education. And then after that, that's when I'm going to start taking the necessary action to actually start getting deals in the pipeline, building the team, et cetera. So that's what I mentioned. And I've seen many other individuals that look to make the shift to multifamily and never actually get that first deal because they're still in the education phase, and they take that education phase. And one associate I know of calls it YouTube University. They spend all this time on YouTube and reading books to get all this necessary knowledge and to never take action. So I'm just a firm believer that you can never know it all. Even till this day, I still don't know it all. And I share my experiences that from that is you just end up putting that deadline in place, getting all the education, which I'll go into the specifics on education, and then boom, start to take the action. So that's the first one. And then the second is the education piece. And what I mean by education is when I first made this is in the single family side, is I was able to find a mentor and start working for that person for completely free. So I bartered my way to get the real world knowledge. However, if you don't have that type of capability, one path that you can take is there's one great book, not affiliated by any means. And this was one of my favorite books by David Linhall, and it's Multifamily Millions. And the reason why I like this book is there's plenty of books out there that are in the real estate field that are very mundane, meaning they're very dry. I do know there's books on Bigger Pockets that are great. If you're looking to just get started overall on real estate, I know Brandon's got several books that are on Bigger Pockets that I've heard great things about. So just that book, when I made the transition from single family to multifamily, was great with knowing the ins and outs of the specific field and not being too dry and just very simple. The second is understanding the lingo. There's a difference on the lingo or the nomenclature of and what I mean by that from single family to multifamily is there is net operating income. There is cap rate, which cap rate is used also in single family, but even more on the multifamily. There is the gross potential rent. Well, wouldn't say gross potential rent, but there's quite a bit of lingo that's associated with this field. The T12, which is the trailing 12 financials, profit and loss. That's something that you will want to receive from the owner when you're doing your underwriting. That book, one more time for Ariana, is Multifamily Millions by David Linhall. And those of you who are on the Instagram in front of me, my handle is Sterling White Official. One more time, that is Sterling White Official. Just want to make sure my audio is still good. Do you have to start in single family? No, you do not have to start in single family. You can go straight to multifamily. But the thing is, and I know I'm segueing, I just want to answer this question, is there's many individuals out there that say, hey, you want to go 75 or 100 units plus in terms of your first deal. Yes, that does make sense from a economies of scale standpoint and the efficiencies. You've got the on-site staff, such as a maintenance and then also a community manager. However, that can be very daunting for individuals because that is your first deal being 100 units. You're looking at millions of dollars to be able to raise to get that. So my approach, and I often get asked if I were to go back and do it all over again, I would still start with the single family because I learned so much through that process that I was able to take a lot of those principles and then translate them over to multifamily. Because I'll tell you that I have 156 unit. I've had a 150 single families. That it's a lot more easier to from managing that many single families and understanding that infrastructure, that it was much more easier to manage 156 unit. That's just me personally. Thanks, Manuel Santiago, for joining. We've got Martel Gaines. Thanks for dropping that book in the comments. You're awesome and phenomenal. And going back to the educate, and also Bigger Pockets, that's a phenomenal source. And I've got to mention to everyone that yes, that tool is right in front of you, so do not neglect it. I'm just doing from a experience share that is a phenomenal tool in itself. So there's the forums where people say, hey, this is a learning lesson that I was able to go through. Another one is I actually wrote a case study of my very first deal, which was a 46 unit. So I literally took it from, okay, this is, and this was after closing it. This is how it worked from the time of the way how it was acquired, which was through a cold call. This is how the deal was structured. And this is what it looks like post-closing and the lessons that I've learned. So I posted an article on Bigger Pockets, 2 articles on that very similar deal. So you can learn. I'm a firm believer that yes, it's good to learn from your own mistakes, but it's even better to learn from others' mistakes. So leveraging biggerpockets.com, reading the content that's on there, and then sliding into the DM is what I like to say, the direct message, to get very specific questions on, hey, why did you structure it 80% to your investor partners and then 20% to you? Or instead of why did you replace the signage and rename it this, and why didn't you just keep it the same? Which normally you would rebrand a property, and so just come up with a different name and then exchange the signage just to really show the residents. And then also, and this is normally done to a property that has a bad stigma and it's been mismanaged, to show the residents, hey, for lack of a better word, there's a phrase, there's a new sheriff in town. And then also other people that are interested in that renting that specific community will see that there is new ownership. So those are the various reasons why you would change the name to a specific community. So I know I went into a couple directions with that, but in the industry, I like to use the 80-20 principle, and this is still in the education side. There's really only a 20% that you need from a knowledge standpoint, and once you have that knowledge, then you start taking action, which is what I mentioned is one, knowing who the top brokers are in the industry. And then from there, reaching out to them. And that's why it's good to understand the lingo, saying, okay, well, what is a class? I'm looking for a property that has the NOI of XYZ, that I'm able to get a cap rate of this. And if you could send me over the T12 so I could start my under. So these are all the types of things that you want to understand, that 20%. And then once you start to reach out to brokers, for instance, that you have that knowledge, so you don't sound like an absolute complete newbie, and then they end up discounting you and then end up going to someone else. So that's why it's good to start with the educational piece. The next is what I've mentioned a little bit before with the deadline, is at some point you'll just have to take the leap of faith. And I know that can sound scary for many people, especially that those of you who are, because there's just more zeros, and it's not even a leap of faith. Is if you have a full-time job and you're looking to transition entirely to multifamily, or you're looking to translate to the single family side, what helps with when you're taking that leap of faith is I've always taken the principle of burning the bridges. However, that may not be the best principle for most people in terms of comfortability. So if you have that 1 year or 6 to 1 year in terms of cash reserves, at the event that something doesn't work out and you're not able to get that first deal as a way to start driving in income, you still got that. You don't essentially have a short fuse, because now you're having to take shortcuts because you have to cover your overhead to just standard living. So that's what I mean is after you've done after you set the deadline, you've done the necessary education so you can understand the 20%. Essentially, that is utmost importance. There's a lot of in the other 80% is just a lot of things that are good to know because I'm still steadily learning myself. And from that is then once you start the leap of faith and then start to take action, then from there, that's when you can start to market to find the deals. And then the next is building a team. So when you're building a team, I know most of you from the single family side is when you're transitioning to multifamily, you may have to have a different property manager that actually has experience. A property management company that has experience managing multifamily. Second is lenders. If you may have to get a different lender that is more has more experience or has more of an appetite for multifamily. So building the team, or you may have to bring on partners, meaning that partners from the standpoint of, okay, these were my strengths, and then that I was able to apply to the single family model. However, when it comes to the multifamily, these are some additional skills, raising money, going direct or nurturing those relationships with brokers, underwriting these deals and building out models. So from there, that's what I mean by building out teams. So a couple things that you'll want is a property manager who has experience managing multifamily, a construction crew, which your property management company could assist with that. They may do in-house construction. The second is the lender. And the third is the attorney. So that's just a couple that come to mind. And if you're doing a syndication, which is raising money from outside investors from the attorney standpoint, you want to ensure that you're doing things properly and that you don't go to jail, because that's the last thing we would want someone in the Bigger Pockets community to be raising money the incorrect way and end up not getting their hand slapped and facing some time. So that would be the worst. And then the last but not least, and we'll take a couple questions here too, and I'll also do a summary. Just really wanted to drop into the content for you guys. Last but not least is priming your investors. So when I made the shift from single family to multifamily, had those conversations. So with the single families, what I was doing is I would buy, and this is how I was able to scale so quickly, is with friends and family's cash. And that was more so my partner's friends and family, that we would buy 10 single family homes. And these were very affordable in Indianapolis. So would buy them all cash. These were in working class settings. Buy 10 of those all cash, generally in distress. So we would put in additional cash to do the rehab. So majority of the time we'd be all into these properties, about $50,000. Average rent was about $750 to $800. Yes, we're in Indianapolis, so very affordable in terms of the purchase price. What you're all into it in terms of rent, things have definitely gone up since then. So we would have 10 of these. They're all occupied, cash flowing. And then in essence, the BRRRR method that you're all aware of on Bigger Pockets, instead of bringing a bank to cash ourselves out, we would bring outside investors. And in return, they get a return from the cash flow on their money that they've invested, and then would take that original cash of friends and family and then go do the same thing again. So that's the story behind that. So those investors, those outside investors, were more accustomed to the single family. So had the conversation, and this was had the conversation that this is where we're looking to go as a company, that single family. We were closer to, as I mentioned, about 150 or so. And we looked at our long-term vision where we're looking to go, which was multifamily. So looked at, okay, these are the pros, because each of the models has different pros and cons to each. So this is a question for everyone. What would make the most sense to you in terms of the pros associated with the multifamily made the most sense for where I was looking to go. And when I say team involved, is just not myself. And so with that is love that when a buyer is looking to buy an apartment, for instance, they're looking at it as a business. So let's say they're looking strictly from an income standpoint, and then that's what they that's what they offer up on the property. So there's that. So versus with single family, it's more of this sold across the street from this sold across sold across the street from this. So it's more relying upon from a economic standpoint and the volatility. So there's that. And then also on multifamily, there's more economies of scale. So I've had 46 in the individual homes. And when I made that transition to that very first deal, which was an apartment, which was 46 units all in one place, one buyer, and there was a total of 2 roofs. So, and then also was able, so from an efficiency standpoint, you have, let's say, multiple maintenance requests, then you just send one maintenance guy or several maintenance guy there just to one location versus, of course, on the single family, there's 46 individual roofs. They're all scattered throughout the market of Indianapolis. When there's multiple maintenance requests, then he has to go up to the north side, someone out to the west side, south side, east side, etc. So, but either way, each has its pros and cons. It just comes down to where you are looking to go long term. And this is one thing is you could even, I was going to say about, but we're talking about single family to multifamily transition. So, and then to go back what I was mentioning about the investors. So ended up priming them, letting them know, hey, the shift is being made entirely from single family to multifamily. The thing is, some did come along the journey, others did not at the end of the day. So that's about had to shift the marketing overall. Had to shift the marketing overall that, hey, no longer single families. So this was from the marketing and the branding and spoke more on, hey, this is the come invest with us. And let's say multifamily, or when I would go on the podcast, instead of talking about multifamily, instead of talking about single family, I now talk more on multifamily. When I started contributing content, I started going from I didn't go so much into single family. I went more on multifamily. So that's how it all worked from that side. And hopefully that all makes sense with in terms of just the marketing to no longer bring on investors who are interested in investing in the single family side and more that are on the marketing, investing in multifamily opportunities. So that's what I mean from that standpoint. And let's go ahead and answer some questions that we have here. We got Francisco that says, hey, trying to be like you. No, I'm trying to be like you, Francisco. Wow, there's actually a lot more questions than I anticipated that were in here. There's actually a Sterling Strout here. Very interesting in small world. I have met a total of 3 Sterlings in my life. Don't meet very many of those. We got one question that's up here that says, how do you structure your LLCs to split profits with investors? That really does vary on a deal basis. The most recent one was a 85-15% split, where 85% of the equity went to the investor partners, and then 15% went to my partner and I as the general partners, and they are the limited partners. So it really just comes down to what you're providing in terms of cash on cash, and then also your internal rate of return. And then based upon that, you'll tweak your equity splits. That's just what I'm learning from that. We got someone that says, Alex Rogers went to school with me. All right. It says I am smart. Well, I was smart in high school, but when it came to I went to law school with a guy named. Oh, you went to law school with a guy named Sterling. He was smart. Okay, well, thank you. I would like to say I'm smart. Yes, in the business sense. When it comes to chemistry, was not my forte. When I was going to the University of Indianapolis, I took chemistry 1 and 2. Guess. I want everyone to guess below how many times I took chemistry 1 and 2. Would love to get people's opinions on that. Is this time how would you recommend financing your very first deal, and what type would you recommend? And those of you, yes, comment below on how many times it took. So we got one person that says 3. We got a person that says twice each. Ouch. Okay. We got one person that says 3. Okay. And I'll let you guys know after this question. The approach that I took in terms of financing my very first deal was I used a investor's cash, which was my mentor. So how that partnership worked is I determined what my strengths are and my weaknesses, and what his strengths are and his weaknesses. My strengths were I had the time and the ability to find deals. My weaknesses were quite a bit at that time. Didn't have the experience, didn't have the cash. My credit score, when you would pull it, wouldn't even register. And his strengths were he had cash, he had the experience, his credit score was a lot better than mine, but he didn't have the time to find the deal. So that's how I was able to bridge that first partnership. And in essence, found a single family house. This was in 2013. Purchase price was $25,000, and the rehab was $25,000 as well. So he funded the purchase price as well as the rehab, and I was able to retain equity. 90% he had, and then 10% to me out of the cash flow, and then also selling the property. So that's how I was able to find my first deal, is using you down with OPM, which is other people's money. And to answer everyone's question, I took chemistry 5 times. So looks like everyone was off on that one, but great tries, everyone. I bet no one would have guessed that. That goes to show you that college was not for me. All right. And says, did you cold call? Did I cold call the first 46 unit deal? Yes, that was a cold call. The very first deal, the single family in 2013, that was actually a lead from a wholesaler. And that's why it's always good for those of you, is one, when you're looking to find investors or get a good amount of deal flow that's coming in from, let's say, wholesalers, for instance, or brokers, is to get yourself out there, meaning going to local meetups, calling people, calling owners, and getting on their radar. And the thing is, if that's not something that you enjoy doing yourself, is one, at the end of the day, you've got it. It's highly recommended to do it. And if you're not one of those people, you're more of an introvert, then from there, you may have to get a partner on to assist with that. So, all right. Okay. Well, hopefully that does answer your question there. So, right, if you could do some cash offers that would take a chunk out of your savings, but would set you up to not have a 9 to 5, would you recommend such a path? If you could do some cash offers that would take a chunk of your savings, but would set you up to not have a 9 to 5. I personally have not had a 9 to 5. I've myself personally, so I wouldn't be the best to offer insights on that as much as I could. But it sounds like your question is, would you invest now to set up your future self, is the general sense I'm getting from that. So to answer from that standpoint, I would. But I would say is, if it's your last, let's say $5,000 to $10,000, and that is like you're essentially living off that, and you're burning your bridges, and you decide to invest that could get a little bit tricky. So that to each his own on that. But I would say, to answer your question, to invest now to set yourself up in the future, so you'll be able to make that full transition, makes the most sense, is what I'm getting from your question. How long did it take to find your first deal? So I would say it did not take very long. It was 4 to 5 months in terms of being able to find that first deal, Benjamin Jones. And the whole time, what I was doing is I was working for my mentor for completely free up until that point. It was actually maybe about 5 to 6 months in terms of that. So I was working within this property management company, doing everything of what he needed in terms of I was what was a couple things that, he had me doing just about everything. So one thing that I was able to bring in terms of that relationship was he was more of an old school operator, and I had you could say millennial, and I knew a lot more in terms of the tech side. So I was able to take his available apartment units and post those on online platforms such as Zillow, HotPads, Trulia. I know it seems something that's very common, but that was something that he just didn't have that experience doing. So I would go and take pictures of the units, and then also take videos. And there's always this guy it's hilarious that it could be 10 degrees outside and he has no shirt on. It's the funniest thing. So that's just a random so funny. Okay. But yeah, hopefully that does answer your question with that. So it took me about 6 months that first deal on the single family side, and on the multifamily it's about the same, because took the approach with going through brokers, and that was not work. So brokers were sending over deals they weren't even close to in terms of penciling out, because this was in 2017. I'm still getting distracted by the guy with the shirt off. Is that the market was starting to heat up, and they were sending over deals, weren't working out, so decided to go the approach, why not beat the brokers to the punch and look to get these deals at more of a discount, because once they hit the market, people are willing to pay top dollar. So, all right, for smaller multi, what documents are you specifically asking for? P&L, T12, or other documents? Dang it. I meant to. So, Nikki, if you could go back to that other question, not right now. Oh, okay. Yeah, let's keep that one. Yes, we're good. So, you brought up your first home was with no money out of your own pocket. Everyone brings up that, but not many talk about it. Please break that down a bit. Okay, so how that worked on that very specific, and I believe I may have went into this, but I'll just revert back to it. So how it worked with no money out of my pocket was I was doing the networking, getting myself out there, and so I was doing the handwritten letters. Picked a specific neighborhood in Indianapolis, started doing handwritten letters to owners. So I was using multiple channels to be able to find these specific deals. And from there, a wholesaler actually sent over a deal, and I was using the 2% rule as a way to do the underwriting. I was not as sophisticated in terms of doing underwriting and analyzing deals, so I just used the 2% rule, which the 2% rule means, well, the 1% rule is that you're all into a property purchase price as well as rehab, $100,000, and then the rent is 1,000. In Indianapolis, in neighborhoods that weren't war zones, you could actually get the 2% rule. So that's what I was using as back of the napkin math. So got the deal sent over by a wholesaler. 25,000 was the purchase price. The estimated rehab 15,000, which actually turned out to be 25,000. So the all in 40,000, and then the expected rent was 850. So I presented that to my mentor at that time. He said, "Oh, okay, awesome," because he was looking to transition, interesting enough, the other way from multifamily to diversify into single family. So he funded the purchase price and said, "Okay, this is the purchase price. This is so the wholesaler had their fee of their spread. I'm trying to think what it was, but at the time of closing, he funded the purchase price at the closing, and then after we owned it, then the rehab. So we actually paid his maintenance team, and it was closer to 25,000, and that all came out of his pocket. So that's what I mean by that. And then the rent was 850. So on a monthly basis, it was just split. 90% went to him, and then 10% went to myself. So hopefully that does make sense in terms of breaking that down on that. All right. Okay. So back to George Smith's question. Is for smaller multifamily, what documents are you specifically asking for? P&L, T12, or other documents? So that what's needed on the initial underwriting side, of course, once you really get into the due diligence, you're looking for bank statements and you're looking for past 3 years of tax returns. But just on the initial due diligence, rent roll, which showcases, okay, these are the names of the residents, this is the address of the unit, this is the security deposit, this is what they're paying in rent. So you have the rent roll, and then you also have the T12, which is the trailing 12 financials of the profit and loss. And that just simply shows you how the property is currently operating. And then sometimes I'll give you a prime example. There was an apartment just up the street. This was 80 units, acquired it a year and a half ago, in which the owner, he sent over the T12, and the expense ratio was 70%. Is refinancing a good idea right now? If you could find a good lender, but in terms of financing, it's very difficult at this present time. But to go back to this question is, that the expenses, looked at it, that it was at a 70% expense ratio, and the owner did not allocate a lot of those items to CapEx, the types of renovations. And what I mean by that is he did a lot of repairs to the decks. So meaning that would not translate to new ownership because he was entirely completed. So when you're looking at the net operating income from that property and it's at 70% expense ratio, then we knew that if you normalize that, it will run between about a 50 to 55% expense ratio. So it was a no-brainer in terms of was it purchasing that, and that was another one that all started with a cold call. So all right, is there a benefit in investing on a building versus a complex of single residence units? My first and only multifamily is a 3-family, and I'd like to expand on that, but need some direction. And that's by Santiago. Trying to think, is there a benefit in investing on a building versus a complex? If I'm understanding correctly, I would like for you to elaborate a little bit on this, Santiago. Are you referring to, was this a building that was converted to 3 units, and you're trying to distinguish if it's best to invest in those, or a multifamily property that is zoned already and is a triplex? So if you could elaborate a little bit more on that, so I can be able to point you in the right direction. Favorite neighborhoods to invest in Indianapolis, if you're willing to share. Have been researching Indianapolis, Kansas City, Missouri for, and this question is from Elliot. Okay, and I want to answer this next one. How do you find names and numbers to cold call? But first, starting with Elliot, you guys have some phenomenal questions, and those of you on the Facebook, please leave those likes. Would mean the world, and to do the share would really go a long way for me, so more people can see this content, especially if it's bringing you value. And then those of you on Instagram, keep hitting that. There we go. I'll point down a little bit more of those hearts. All right. So the answer to Elliot's question is, I have pushed out more to the suburbs myself personally, in terms of when it comes to investing, because the closer you get to the city, the more knowledge you have to have, because it can get very street by street, block by block. So I prefer to just stick to the suburbs. South side is very good in terms of really getting some a great price on deals. When you go up north, that is a very affluent in terms of this market. So you've got Carmel. There's tons of roundabouts that are there, but that is one of the top places I actually live in the country. So if I could be out in Carmel or Fishers or anywhere up north, would love that, but just priced out pretty much. The west side is pretty good. The east side gets, that's where I was born and raised. It gets, you really have to have your local knowledge when you're on the east side. It's very sporadic. And one thing I would say too is, here in Indianapolis, there is the in terms of the school system, there's the public school, which is more of, you call it Center Township. Well, you wouldn't call it Center Township. Well, it is Center Township. So it's Indianapolis Public Schools, IPS. And then as you push out, you have your township schools. And of course, you have your privates and all the others. But you have the public schools, and then you have your township schools. So if you can find property within those township schools, you'll be able to get a better renter base. But there's also certain neighborhoods that are also really up and coming that are in those IPS schools, especially the ones that are close to downtown. So yeah, right now, Paul, our this specific topic is on transitioning from single family to multifamily, which it appears that you came in a little bit later. Now we're just doing an open Q&A for everyone. So just a refresher for people who are just jumping on here, is the topic was making the transition from single family to multifamily. The first was just creating a deadline. One approach that I've always taken, the specific deadline is a month and a half. Do all the necessary, and this is a good way to avoid the analysis paralysis. And so, yeah, this is a good way to set the analysis to avoid the analysis paralysis. So having something set, and then the next is doing the proper education. And the proper education, one great book to read is Multifamily Millions by David Linhall. That's a great one. And then from that, there's tons of content that are on biggerpockets.com. I myself personally have even wrote articles that really break down that break down actual deals that I've done. So that's a good way to educate yourself. And then from there is to reach out to some of those operators for very tactical questions versus more of like open-ended is how did you go about that deal? That would be an open-ended question. So if you could be more tactical and why did you do a 80-20 split? That way so just very tactical questions from that. And then the next one is using the 80-20 principle. There's only a finite of information that you really need, just doing a personal experience share from an educational standpoint that you need to, oh, he's got a shirt on now, that you need to know, such as the net operating income, the cap rate, looking at when you're receiving, when you're going to do the underwriting, you want the rent roll as well as the T12. So understanding, and the book, one more time, is Multifamily Millions by David Lindhall. And just understanding that finite of 20%, because there's a lot of 80% of additional information. The third is just take the leap of faith, commit first and figure the rest out later, because there's always so many things in this industry. It's always constantly evolving, and you can learn I'm still learning to this day, and I've just been a decade in the industry. On the investing side, close to about 6 years now on the investing side, and still learning. So you can never know it all. So that's why it's good to just take the leap of faith after setting that deadline and you've done the absolute necessary education. And then the next is, excuse me, is to prep your investors, especially if you've used investors on the single family side. Prep them and let them know that you're making the transition to the multifamily. That way you'll be able to gauge and say, okay, these are investors that are going to come with me. These are investors that are not. I need to essentially fill in the gap to go get new investors that I can bring onto the multifamily deals. So the name for those of you on Instagram is Sterling White Official. One more time, that is Sterling White Official. So, and then we're just going to answer two more additional questions. And with investors, if you don't, because the thing is with multifamily, oftentimes you're just adding another zero onto things, is to start to have those relationships yesterday. If you don't have the cash to be able to make that entire transition, and you need to use OPM, which is other people's money. So let's say you have it all invested in single family, and then now you're looking to make the transition to multifamily, is to start forming those relationships as soon as possible versus getting a deal under contract. Then you're going out and looking to raise money from the investor side. So there's that. And then the last but not least with the investors is starting with your power base as much as you can, friends and family, friends of friends, etc. So we'll go ahead and answer what question we have here. What is a good start, single family or duplex when starting real estate investing? All right. So I would say that would be a personal question for you. The more units you can go, the better. This question is from Echo on the YouTube. Yeah, the more units that you can go, the better, because what people are facing now that have single families, that let's say the resident moves out and we're not in COVID at this current time, that you're either 100% occupied or you are 100% vacant. And when you're 100% vacant, you're still having to pay that mortgage payment. So that's the thing with multiple units. So for instance, let's say a 40 unit deal, you have two residents move out. You still have, you're over 95% occupied, and you still have plenty additional income that you were able to leverage. Additional income to be able to cover the mortgage as well as all your expenses that you do have. All right, so we have one last question here. I'm looking to 1031 exchange to rental properties with high equity. Can I exchange into multiple commercial properties at once? That would be a question for a 1031 intermediary. I believe since it is like kind in terms of asset, you should be fine. But that's definitely a question for a 1031 intermediary. And a 1031 intermediary is the one that you would need to have in order to do that, because someone couldn't just go out on themselves and sell a deal and it would be tax-free in terms of those 1031 funds, and then go buy another deal. You would have to have a mediary, someone that actually does that for you. So definitely reach out to that individual in the event that you do that. All right. So, what are some organizations or places we can find mentors and people to connect with, like to discuss? Go into your local meetup. There is it's gonna be posted on here, which is biggerpockets.com//events, where you can find local meetups and tons of, there we go, biggerpockets.com/events. And then from there, you can visit that. And that's a good way for you to find different networking events, to where most of these events are people who are looking to just get started, but there's also some movers and shakers there. And it's about determining how you can be of value to that individual. All right. So last question that we have here is, what is up, church? Is that, how do you find names and numbers to cold call? You would use a source such as been verified, not affiliated. This is actually what I personally use. It is paid. That is been verified, BEEN verified.com. Or there's another one that's actually free with it, which is truepeoplesearch.com. However, the thing with paid versus not paid is that you get what you pay for. So if you don't pay for nothing, the data is not as credible as it is with the one that you do end up paying for. So that's just personally for me. So yeah, I appreciate everyone for being on these streams. This upcoming Sunday, I will have one too as well. I forget the topic. I believe it's along the lines of me doing analyzing a specific deal for you all. So you'll definitely want to catch that Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you all be safe out there. So we'll go ahead and answer Alex's question, because there's a ton of other questions that are here too. That's one thing I would say for everyone to consider. I have a 470K cash. I should go all in a 40-unit building, or should I expand on my portfolio with many multifamily units? Go multifamily. So, all right, everyone, have a great one. If you happen to have any additional questions, don't ever hesitate to reach out. We're here to be of value at the end of the day. Thank you so much, and keep being safe out there, and trust and stay safe, healthy, and well. So have a great one. And yes, this will be saved for those of you who are on the Instagram. One last question: how can I find out the zoning areas for multifamily units? That is all public record. So there we go, Alan. You can just reach out to your specific county. All right, everyone. So have a great one. Hopefully that did answer your question, Martinez. That was in terms of an open question, but I would just say expand on your portfolio with that cash that you do have, and then also invest some of it in yourself too. So thank you all. Have a great one. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you so much.